Somewhere, in another time, in another place, there is an impossibility. A city, lighter than air, suspended amongst the clouds. A city called Columbia. It's here where the faithful can find redemption, where the patriotic can find liberty. And it's here where a man can make good on an even bigger impossibility. The American dream. Ever elusive, almost always out of reach, but something we all hope for, like a clear sky on the 4th of July or a white Christmas. The American dream is the idea of prosperity, and if there's one thing all Americans can attest to, it's that it isn't a certainty, but it is a promise. A promise that those willing to lift themselves by their bootstraps and work for their success will someday pluck the fruit of their labors and be granted a star-spangled Eden to call home. But what about those who don't have bootstraps? Or what about those whose straps snap under the pressure? And what about those who are denied the right to rise? In Colombia, like its father country, prosperity is only afforded to a certain kind of man, for the dream isn't as inclusive as many would have you think. If there's ever a quote to describe Colombia, the shining city in the sky, it's this.
Just because the city flies don't mean it ain't got its fair share of fools.
While it may be a marvel of science and art, Colombia actually has an ugly side. It's a grotesque tableau of religious and racial bigotry, and in an age where the abolitionist movement had already taken root in the United States, Colombia stands as a response from a fearful ruling class in an attempt to preserve some misguided sense of racial purity. And yet, for all of its old-school conservatism, Colombia represents a form of progress as well. It flies, for goodness sake. Robots are the Colombian commuter's mainstay, and its architecture is a triumphant display of American exceptionalism by way of Beaux Arts neoclassicism. Colombia is both a thing of beauty and an ugliness beyond condemnation. And why is that? How is it possible that a city elevated so high above the world in almost every facet could sink to such despicable depths? There are a myriad of reasons, many of which could be seen today, just by turning on the news or reading a history book. However, the simplest answer lies in the vision of one man, Zachary Hale Comstock, the self-proclaimed prophet and despot of Colombia. In part 1 of this new multi-part series, we will be examining the fictional city of Colombia. We'll piece together how the city came to be and why it was doomed to fall. And in the end, we'll see how Colombia's failure acts as foreshadowing for the downfall of another impossible city, a city found in the pelagic depths of the Atlantic. But before heading down, we must push upwards. Somewhere, a sinful man accepts a baptism and washes away the taint on his soul. Somewhere else, the same man turns his back on redemption and instead finds salvation in a bottle. Like Colombia, this man is a veritable Janus, having in him the potential for two faces, one sinner, one saint. We already know the name of one of those faces, Zachary Hale Comstock, a born-again Christian and the future prophet of Colombia. The other face, however, goes by a different name. On April 19th, 1874, Booker DeWitt is born. While there is nothing known about his parentage, certain voxophones hint to a possible Native American ancestry.
Comstock came by the wagon at dawn. Man was just transfixed by my trophy scalps. Asked about the white ones there. I said, well, sir, if your quarry dwells in the jungle and beds down with the local color, why split hairs? Not a chuckle out of him. Either he ain't seen a man go native, or maybe too many.
The voxophone reveals that Preston Downs, a big game hunter, developed a habit of scalping whites as punishment for laying with Native Americans. As a descendant of such a union, Comstock's humorless reaction to Downs' trophies would make sense. The scalps would be, unbeknownst to the hunter, a condemnation of who the prophet truly is. But, as we'll see, it's a condemnation that Comstock shares, as he has spent his entire life denying rumors of his ancestry. Unfortunately for him, there's enough evidence in-game to support the claim. For instance, in another voxophone recorded by Downs, we learn that Booker speaks Sioux, which is the language of the Dakota tribes. This could be interpreted as additional evidence of his native heritage. Comstock would eventually go on to find more subtle ways of denying his ancestry. The knowledge of his lineage places Comstock's phrenological study in a new light. It is likely he adopted the pseudoscience as a way of distancing himself from his native background, since popular perception viewed them as savage and intellectually inferior. We can see video of Comstock juxtaposed against the faces of various Native American men, which likely served a twofold purpose. The first being a way to showcase the Columbian assumption of the white man's God-given superiority by comparing a white man's skull to that of a native. The second being a way of showing how Comstock's skull differs from the natives, giving the prophet's rejection of his American Indian background further credence. But Booker's youth is mostly unexplored. We know that he was hounded his entire life by what he considered to be a hideous lie. Booker joins the United States Army when he is still a teen. He is placed in the 7th Cavalry Regiment, where a sergeant accuses him of being of Native American descent.
In front of all the men, the sergeant looked at me and said, "Your family tree shelters a teepee or two, doesn't it, son?" This lie, this calumny had followed me all my life. From that day, no man truly called me comrade. It was only when I burnt the teepees with the squaws inside did they take me as one of their own. Only blood can redeem blood.
Booker is furious. There is hate burning inside of him. Hate towards the sergeant for his aspersions, and even more hate for the possible truth of those aspersions. He is desperate to prove his detractors wrong. On December 28, 1890, Booker commits atrocities against the natives, taking part in the massacre at Wounded Knee. This earns him quite a reputation amongst his fellow soldiers, one of which, a man named Cornelius Slate, recounts Booker's actions in grim detail.
DeWitt. We called him the White Injun of Wounded Knee for all the grisly trophies he claimed. A man such as he might just grant us the peace we seek.
Although lionized by his fellow soldiers as the hero of Wounded Knee, Booker is overcome with feelings of guilt and remorse. Sometime between the years 1890 and 1892, he leaves the army, his shame eventually leading him to a Riverside Baptism. It's here where the two faces of this Janus finally split. In one timeline, the guilt-ridden Booker DeWitt accepts the baptism and is absolved of his sins. He welcomes the teachings of Christ into his life and adopts a new name, Zachary Hale Comstock. In another timeline, Booker rejects the baptism, knowing full well that a simple dunk in the river could never wash the blood from his hands. From this point onward, the two men tread very different paths. Comstock attempts to mold a new identity for himself, one founded on ideas of patriotism, faith, and purity. To him, he is reborn, freed from the wickedness of his past life. But in truth, Comstock is no different than the born-again evangelicals who look scornfully upon the unsaved. Strange, when you consider that he himself was a part of that flock once upon a time. Though devout, Comstock's true purpose is yet to be revealed to him. Booker DeWitt, on the other hand, begins life anew. In 1892, he falls in with the Pinkerton National Detective Agency, where he gains a new reputation, one as a ruthless strikebreaker. Booker is not a good man. He is known for using excessive force to resolve labor disputes, and yet, despite this, he does manage to find love. That same year, he marries a woman whose name is never revealed in game. However, lead writer and creative director Ken Levine took to Twitter and revealed the name of this woman to be Annabelle Watson. Annabelle. It's a familiar name, one that should be recognizable to any Infinite lorester.
Annabelle?
Excuse me?
Annabelle, it's me, Esther.
Oh, no, I'm not Annabelle.
Are you sure?
My name is Elizabeth. Do I know you?
Elizabeth. Isn't that a lovely name?
A secret hidden in plain sight is the best kind of secret indeed. Later that year, Annabelle becomes pregnant. In 1893, what should be a joyous occasion turns to ashes as Annabelle dies during childbirth. Booker names his newborn daughter, Anna, in honor of his wife. Now an emotional wreck, he finds solace in drinking and gambling. Booker is a broken man, one who believes there's nothing left to lose. Sadly for him, there is, and he won't just lose it, he'll give it away. In another timeline, Comstock begins to believe himself chosen by divinity. He purports being visited by an angel bearing a vision of a floating city.
And then the archangel showed a vision, a city, lighter than air. I asked her, "Why do you show this to me, archangel? I'm not a strong man. I'm not a righteous man. I am not a holy man." And she told me the most remarkable thing. "You're right, prophet. But if grace is within the grasp of one such as you, how can anyone else not see it in themselves?"
Comstock is given something he didn't possess before: purpose. He envisions himself as a modern-day Noah and sees the floating city as an ark, as a way to buoy his perceived wickedness of a post-bellum America.
And when the angel Columbia gave unto the founders the tools to build a new Eden, they did so without hesitation. For 85 years they prepared the way of the Lord. But when the great apostate came, he brought war with him, and the fields of Eden were soaked with the blood of brothers. The only emancipation he had to offer was death.
Shortly after, Comstock meets a quantum physicist named Rosalind Lutece. Whether this meeting was by chance or premeditated isn't known, though with the former, one can imagine Comstock viewing this encounter as an act of providence. An eccentric woman, Lutece developed a fascination with the idea of multiple worlds theory at a young age.
When I was a girl, I dreamt of standing in a room looking at a girl who was and was not myself, who stood looking at another girl who also was and was not myself. My mother took this for a nightmare. I saw it as the beginning of a career in physics.
Rosalind's fascination never wanes, and she eventually begins a career in the sciences, specifically within the realms of atomic manipulation. Comstock becomes fixated with her work and believes it can be of use to him. He agrees to fund her continued research in return for her aid in constructing the floating city he had seen in his visions. Rosalind agrees, and such their partnership begins. However, a city cannot float on faith and science alone. Like with everything in this world, Comstock needs money. In 1892, he lobbies the United States Congress for funding, appealing to their desire to showcase American superiority to the rest of the world.
As the months and years turned to memories, so did the men of Congress turn to righteousness. And through the technology of men, the dollars of Washington, the Lord worked his will upon Columbia and raised her high above the Sodom below.
Knowing of the upcoming World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago and what a floating city would mean for the country's image, they agree to Comstock's request. Construction begins immediately, with the goal of unveiling the project at the World's Fair. They apply Lutece's theory, who postulates that her research would be capable of keeping the city aloft using what her colleagues refer to as quantum levitation, though she considers the name a misnomer.
I had trapped the atom in mid-air. Colleagues called my Lutece field quantum levitation, but in fact it was nothing of the sort. Magicians levitate. My atom simply failed to fall. If an atom could be suspended indefinitely, well, why not an apple? If an apple, why not a city?
Her work culminates in the realization of the Lutece particle, a means of suspending atoms in space and countering the effects of gravity. This device will eventually lead to even greater discoveries, but we'll cover those at the appropriate time. May 1st, 1893 marks the onset of the world's Columbian Exposition. It is a site of historic firsts, such as the first widespread use of electricity, as nearly 100,000 incandescent lamps are used to illuminate the fairgrounds. The fair also introduced the world to the Chicago wheel, known today as the Ferris wheel. However, the centerpiece of the fair is the floating city. Named Columbia in honor of the female personification of the U.S., it is received with great fanfare. The city is an architectural triumph, drawing in massive crowds who are awed by its Romanesque columns and gilded busts of divine messengers. On the day of its unveiling, Columbia is launched into the heavens, where it proudly embarks on a goodwill tour around the world, acting as a symbol of American exceptionalism. And it will continue to do so for another 8 years. That is, until the boxers show Columbia for what it truly is. Sadly, by then, it will be too late. Hey people, I'd like to give a special thanks to my patrons who have been very generously donating and been incredibly patient while I struggle to get this beast up and running. I know it's taken a little bit longer than I would have anticipated or I would have hoped, but at long last, with my new computer and my ability to record things with a almost like infinite amount of space on an external hard drive, like things are finally getting up and running. So I'd like to thank, in no particular order, Aaron Ho, Fabian Deltar G, Matthias, I apologize if I butcher your last name, Varfort, Michael Get Good Kreischer, Dylan Kuzel, Jordan Thomas Holtz, Garbage, best fucking name ever, Garbage, Catherine Delgado, Matthew Shiriak, again, apologize if I skewer that name, Feathered Claw, Michael R. McCracken, and if I missed anyone else, I am super sorry. It's just that Patreon won't allow me to see a list of all of my patrons. I can't see a list of your names, so I basically had to take all your names off of the notifications board. To everyone else, to the subscribers of the YouTube channel, again, also, equal thanks. I love you all. I would not have actually accomplished what I've accomplished and set out to do what I've done without your dedication and your positive feedback. So once again, thanks so much. More to come soon, I promise. I know it's been a long time coming, but now that I got this beast up and running, we are moving full speed ahead. My goal is to be able to get a video to 2 videos done a month. So onwards and upwards and all that good shit. All right, later, folks.